My name is Susanne. I'm a compulsive eater. I choose my meals off of the grey sheet. I write them down, I commit them to my sponsor, and I eat them, and I eat nothing else no matter what. And I make that my number one priority today. And I have done for just over a year now, which is why I'm here today qualifying. And as I thought about what I would talk about, obviously I am going to qualify and tell you why I'm here, because I think that is important. But I want to spend some time talking about what's changed, because there is so much hope in this program, especially for the newcomer. So where do I come from? I've eaten more than everyone else I know most of my life as a child, but I didn't see it as a problem until in my teens when I started to diet. And I did have discipline then, because for me this is a progressive disease. So when I first started, I had, like the drug addict, I was absolutely fine. I was able to restrict. I was able to do what I wanted to do, lose the weight to an extent. But in my 20s, early 20s, I was dieting. I stayed on one and the same diet for about 3 or 4 years. And it was a pretty severe diet. I never deviated from it. It was rabbit food. I can't describe it any other way. It was rabbit food. But because it suited me, because as a child, I was always one that ate more than everybody else. And with this diet, I was able to continue eating more than everybody else. But because that kind of food has no calories, more or less, I was able to eat vast quantities of food without being huge. And that worked for me for these 3 or 4 years that I did it. When I went off it one time, and I decided consciously for my birthday, some people were taking me out. I was 21 years old, I remember this. I went out for my birthday and said, okay, this one time we're going out, I'm going to eat whatever I want, and the next day I'm back to as I have been for the last 3 or 4 years. And that did not work. Oh my goodness. Prior to that, I hadn't binged. Prior to that, I just had always eaten more than everyone else, but it was never such an issue. But after that, it was like a dam broke, and I was eating, and could not stop. It felt like my subconscious was desperate to catch up with those 3 or 4 years of deprivation. And what ended up happening is over the course of a couple of months, it wasn't much, I gained 50 pounds. It was a desperate time. I literally ate every day to the point of pain, never to the point of throwing up, because I just couldn't make it happen. If I could have, I would have. I've spent time in front of sinks and toilets wishing, and nothing ever happened. I couldn't do it. I thank God for this mercy today. But it just meant that I was uncontrollably gaining weight, because there just was no way for me to not eat. I could not go a single day without doing this. And in all that time, I managed to somehow keep my outside functioning to some degree, while other people obviously saw me ballooning up and wondered what was going on. In terms of my functioning, my studies and stuff, that was still working. I was able to do that. So I managed to take myself to New York, miserable and eating the whole time, but I managed to have a job. I managed to do all these things. And I must have come to a point of despair in New York at some point, and probably just Googled overeating, help, something along those lines. And I found, wouldn't you know, GreySheeters Anonymous. So I have never been to AA. I've never been to OA. I went straight to the source. I went straight to the right place, I feel like. So I found GreySheeters Anonymous, and there were meetings, live meetings happening where I was. I was in Manhattan. So I got myself to a meeting, again, being a complete virgin to all things 12 steps. So there's these people sitting in a church hall around in a circle, and I just thought this was very strange. And they all knew that I was new, and I felt very kind of self-conscious, and I didn't say anything. And this woman spoke, and she said things that I would never have told a soul. Like, I was going to take these things to my grave about how I ate and how I didn't feel like I had a choice, and how when I got to the complete fullness point of pain, I still couldn't stop eating and would just start spitting it out after chewing it. These kind of things that I was so ashamed about, she said out loud. But she was talking about them in the past tense. She said, I used to do that and now I'm not doing it. And I was like, oh, this place is for me. I need to hear about this. So I listened. After the meeting, I asked for the food plan, and they gave me a sponsor and the food plan. The sponsor went through the food plan with me. She sat down. She talked me through exactly what to do. She got me to agree 3 meals for the next day, probably the same day actually, because it was a morning meeting, and sent me off to the supermarket. And I did that. I went through it. And I think I just wasn't ready. I wasn't ready. I did about 2 or 3 weeks of this, but I just found it too much of a hassle. Clearly, my overeating wasn't hassle enough. So I found this just too much of a hassle to go supermarket shopping, carry all that stuff home. This is Manhattan, so it's not like you just stick it in your car boot. It's you have to carry it up and down stairs in the subway and in bags and stuff. And shopping and chopping and cooking. Now, I did not grow up cooking. My mother didn't cook. So I actually had grown up on frozen microwavable foods. That was my everyday food. So to me, all the involvement with food that this gray sheet thing required was just too much of a culture shock. And after 2 or 3 weeks, I stuck the gray sheet into a book because I didn't want to throw it away. I felt like it would be a nice souvenir one day, and kind of left it behind and kind of, probably forgot about it, moved on. A year later, I lived in Virginia, and I was just so beaten again. And I found that gray sheet. I dug for it. I found it in the book exactly where I left it. And I made a few phone calls. I got a sponsor. There were no meetings where I was, but the phone bridge was already in existence, and so was the GreyNet. That was what I had. That was how I got Abstinent. Got a sponsor that I never met in person, but I made my 3 calls a day. I went to a phone bridge meeting every day. I was doing the work. I was taking the steps, and I found freedom. And I got abstinent, and I stayed abstinent. And this is kind of part of my story, that every time till to date that I've wanted to be abstinent, I have been able to be abstinent. So I've never had the kind of experience of I can't do it, because when I wanted to, I was able to. And for me, there is something about this food plan, because in those 10 years between leaving Grey Sheet 11 years ago and coming back 10 years ago, and I know I've skipped a little bit, in those 10 years, I tried so many food plans and nothing I could stick to. I mean, at the end, I couldn't even go a single day without sugar, without picking up sugar. And then I got the Grey Sheet back, and suddenly it works. There is something that is definitely, for me, this is part of the first 3 steps. I know I can't do it, but there is a higher power helping me do this. So just to go back, I stayed on Grey Sheet for probably, all in all, probably about 7 years, but I didn't have 7 years of continuous abstinence, always sort of 3 or 4 years. And then I decided it wasn't for me. Why did I decide it wasn't for me each time? 2 reasons. And I'm sharing these reasons because I'm hoping they help other people. One reason is when I walked away from the group, when I felt like, well, I have a sponsor, I'm calling my food in, everything else is optional, thanks very much. And I'm doing the food, obviously. Over time, it wore me down. That I did not hear my story. I didn't hear other people's stories. I wasn't serving anybody. I was just doing my food, and it works for a few months for me. But in the end, I would always hear the voices, both in my own head that tells me I don't have a disease, because it will tell me that, but also, thank you, Catherine, and also of people around me, as I've had people say to me, you're so obsessed with your scale, just relax. And I will hear these voices, and I will take them seriously when I don't hear other people's stories that remind me of why I'm here, why I'm doing this. Because when I live in freedom, I'm free. When I'm on the Grey Sheet for a few years, there isn't the obsession. There isn't that noise in my head, and I hear, that's something I've learned. I need to stay with the group. I need to hear these stories. The second reason I left, every time I left, was because I restricted myself on the grey sheet from things that are abstinent on the grey sheet. And those were various things. Sometimes it was sweetness or coffee or types of vegetable or types of fats, whatever. Things I liked, but decided for some reason I didn't want to, I shouldn't have it, whatever. Abstinent things. I have learned that for me, I do not restrict abstinent things. I enjoy the things I enjoy because I need to look forward to my meals. I need to love my meals. I can go for I can go for days, for months actually, eating foods I don't love, but it leads me away from wanting to be on the grey sheet, because there will be a point where I'm just like, you know what, actually, I don't want this. I don't like this. This isn't good enough. When I look forward to my next meal, especially breakfast, that is my favorite meal of the day, it keeps me because I know I want it and I know it's going to be abstinent. That is the sweet spot. That's exactly where I want to be. So those are two things that I have learned why I left, and I'm here now knowing better. And the other thing I wanted to share in terms of where I'm at now and hope for the newcomer is, every time I've been on grey sheet, there's been freedom. Within days of the noise in my head, there's this sort of what somebody on a meeting once called this constant hum of shame. The hum of the noise about food. Can I eat this? Can I eat that? Do I exercise to make up for eating that? That's one kind of noise, but also the noise of just, I don't have integrity. I don't want people looking at me when I'm not abstinent, all the secret stuff that I do. Whereas when I'm abstinent, my food's out there, my who I am is out there, and it's okay, and I've handed it over. And I've handed over my food. I've surrendered my food to my sponsor. And over the last few, probably weeks and months, I have also learned to hand over the noise of my body and my body image to a different authority. I know I can't be trusted to know what food is right for me and how much food and how it should be. I've handed that to my sponsor. I've also learned that my head is not right when it comes to what I think I look like. So I have handed that over to someone else, to my husband, who, what he says, what he thinks, that, I am not to be critical of something that he is happy with. So this is the end of that noise, because that is another kind of noise that I've lived with for as long as I can remember. And now I look in the mirror, I look at myself straight in the eyes. I have this integrity that I walk in. I'm not doing anything in secret. And I don't examine myself the way I used to with those glasses of criticism. But actually, the food is surrendered. My body is surrendered. The space and peace in my head is something else. I'm just like, what do I do now? This is freedom. This is like, next level. And it's a wonderful place to be. And I have to say, I'm just so grateful that I was able to come back, that this fellowship, thank you, Catherine, is still here and has been here the entire time. When I made those calls after 10 years away, it was, and I got onto Zoom, that wasn't there 10 years ago. There were faces I recognized from 10 years prior, from New York, from, various roundups that I've been to. People who have continuously been there, who have stayed. And that gives me hope. I'm here with 1 year, but there's people here from the 90s who have done this day after day after day. And, in 30 years' time, if I'm still in this world, I'd like to be in that place, because that's where freedom is. And I know it. I've done so much research. I'm finished with the research. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.